पृथिवी शान्तिरन्तरिक्षगं शान्तिर् द्यौः शान्तिर्दिशः शान्तिरवान्तर दिशाः शान्तिरग्निः शान्तिर्वायुः शान्तिरादित्यः शान्तिश्चन्द्रमा शान्तिर्नक्षत्राणि शान्तिरापः शान्तिरोषधयः शान्तिर्वनस्पतयः शान्तिर्गौः शान्तिरजा शान्तिरश्व शान्तिः पुरुषः शान्तिर्ब्रह्म शान्तिर्ब्राह्मणः शान्तिः शान्तिरेव शान्तिः शान्तिर्मे अस्तु शान्तिः. May there be peace on earth and in the sky. May there be peace in the water and in all directions. May there be peace in the plants, in the trees, and in animals. May there be peace in the hearts of all beings. May there be peace in everyone and in everything. Sarvetra sukhinas santu, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet, sarvastaratu durgani, sarvo bhadrani pashyatu, sarvas sadbuddhimapnotu, sarvas sarvatra nandatu. May all be happy and healthy. May all see what is good, and may no one experience misery. May all overcome their obstacles and acquire good tendencies. May people everywhere find joy and fulfillment. Let us now spend some time touching the center of peace and joy in our hearts. A good way to begin the practice is to withdraw the scattered energies of the mind and bring them to rest on one point. That point can be our own breathing. Let us therefore practice breathing with awareness. As we breathe in, let us visualize that our body and mind are being filled with love, strength, and compassion. And as we breathe out, let us release all the stress, anxiety, and exhaustion in the body and mind. Let us practice this way for a while. Let us now turn our attention to the region of our heart. Although God is present everywhere and in everyone, the divine presence can be felt most clearly in our hearts. We can meditate in any way we have been taught. To remain focused, we can take the help of a short mental prayer or a mantra or a divine name. Let us now spend some time dwelling on the presence of God in our hearts. Om Satoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Aviravirmayedhi Rudrayatte Dakshinam Mukham Tenamam Pahi Nityam. May the Divine lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May the Divine Consciousness fill our hearts and protect us. In the last class, we saw the importance about what kind of thought we have just at the moment of death, the significance of what we are thinking when death comes, and how it influences what happens after death. So very quickly to see just the translation of the previous three verses, beginning with verse 5. He who at the time of death remembers me alone and passes out, leaving the body, attains my being. There is no doubt about this. Thinking of whatever object at the time of death a person leaves the body, he attains, O son of Kunti, that very object, being constantly absorbed in its thought. Therefore remember me at all times and fight. With your mind and intellect devoted to me, you shall attain me alone. There is no doubt about this. In this context, we also saw the story of Jadabharata, which is mentioned in ancient texts, about how a great sage who was, although very advanced in spiritual life, got attached to a deer and had to be reborn as a deer because that was the last thought in his mind. And so the idea is, if we train ourselves now, train our mind to dwell on the infinite, to dwell on God, then because the mind is trained that way right now, when the time of death comes, and none of us knows when it's going to be, but whenever it comes, because the mind is trained now, it will automatically tend to think of God at that point. But if I'm not trained my mind at all now to think of God, then when that last moment comes, first of all, it won't come naturally to me. Not only that, even when people around me, say around on the bed, I'm lying on a deathbed. Well, the person who is dying doesn't see it as a deathbed, but even if the people around, and sometimes we do, people around are praying, they are chanting, so there are pictures, holy pictures and everything kept. All of those things are meant to remind the person who's about to go, think of God. This is the thing to be thought of. But if we have not trained ourselves to think of God earlier in life, these external things have only limited utility, because in spite of that, we will not be able to think of God. Not only that, sometimes it can produce an opposite reaction. And I've seen it happen. Just see, if someone is sick in a hospital, and when people go, generally, what the sick person likes to hear is, everything is going to be fine. And it's not very hopeful if someone tells it, think of God right now, which almost some people are terrified by that. It's like, oh, when you people are giving up hope on me. And so even if someone were to remind us to think of God at that time, it depends on whether we will take it positively or negatively, on how we have trained ourselves earlier on in life. And so this is that transition period is very important. So let's now begin with verse 8. Abhyasa yoga yuktena cetasa nanyagaminam paramam purusham divyam yati parthanu chintayan. With a mind that has taken to the way of constant practice and does not stray to anything else, one who thinks of the Supreme Divine Being attains him, O Partha. So the question here is, how do we train ourselves to think of God alone? It really begins, first of all, with training ourselves to holding on to one thought, even if it's not of God. The challenge for many people is to hold on to one thought. And that's why we nowadays speak about attention deficit and so on. The capacity to hold on to one idea, one train of thinking, is very important for success in life in general, not just spiritual life. And the culture in which we live does not make it any easier. Rather than training us, helping us to hold on to one idea, one stream of thought, if you like, the culture kind of gives in to our present weaknesses, and it kind of, it all get ties up with advertisements, business. I mean, when you watch any program on a television, the frequency with which there are these commercial breaks. Now you might say, well, it's as I said, it's all tied up because that's what brings revenue to the different channels. But on the other hand, even if you're watching some serial or watching some story, and if it's going to be interrupted with advertisements, it's preventing you from the ability to just hold on to some story, some line of thinking, even if it's for 15 minutes or 20 minutes. So the world outside is not very helpful in helping us to hold on to these things. And that is why even when we have to do some studies, some research, people get so often distracted and people speak about multitasking. Some people will have some song going on and then they do other things which may not seem such a bad idea from one perspective, but on the other hand, it's also then not helping the mind to just hold on. If you're listening to a song, listen to a song. If you are reading, just read. But if you're trying to do both, you are doing neither perfectly. Actually, and as I think we have spoken on this in the past, in a real sense, multitasking is not possible. I mean, if you want to be very technical about it, at any given moment, the mind can think of only one thing. Now, we have the illusion that simultaneously there's a lot of ideas in my mind, a lot of thoughts are there. They are not there at the same moment. The mind is just flitting from this. It's kind of going back and forth. But because it does it so fast, we think that they are there simultaneously. So even when you're so-called multitasking, you're not really multitasking. You are just doing, say you're listening to a song for a moment, the next moment you're doing something else. Even when you're driving and you're listening, it's still you're not doing two things simultaneously. But because it happens so fast, we don't realize it. So that's a good thing to keep in mind. From the Indian psychology point of view, the mind can hold only one thought at any given time. So what we need first of all is to train ourselves to hold a mind to one thought. And once that training comes, then we can choose what thought we want to hold it to. Vivekananda said that concentration is the key to knowledge. All great discoveries that have occurred, all great inventions that have occurred in science, technology, all great breakthroughs that have occurred even in humanities, all great insights that people have come up with, all great works of art that are come, everything has happened only through concentration. When the artist or the writer or the scientist is able to focus his entire being on whatever is being studied or researched, then the deeper truths of that are revealed. And that's when breakthroughs occur. And that's also true with regard to knowing the self, knowing the Atman. So just thinking casually, say 5 minutes meditation in the morning, 5 minutes in the evening, might bring us some amount of calmness, some amount of satisfaction. But then if we are expecting, oh, I want to get enlightened, but I do a little bit of meditation every day, that's not, that seems rather unrealistic. But think about all these, even people who have received Nobel Prize, for instance, they just kind of casually read some book and say, oh, I just read for the book half an hour and I got a Nobel Prize for it. It doesn't happen. So many years of research has gone. They have had to sacrifice so many other interests in life to devote themselves to the pursuit of some study, some field, and then they achieve something grand in that one. So same thing in spiritual life. We can get some amount of peace of mind and joy and a good sleep with a regular practice of meditation, which is okay. But if you want something deeper, then we need to concentrate. And that's what Krishna is saying here, Abhyasa Yoga. Abhyasa means a practice, a repeated practice with concentration, with focus. There was that the TV Mahabharat serial. Have you seen? How many of you have seen it? So you might remember there's one little incident which is actually quite funny and I think it just teaches us a lot. So it is when all these Pandava brothers are little children, and this Arjuna, who is asleep, and then night he suddenly hears some sound. And then he just wakes up. Who is making this sound at night? It almost seems like whether some rats around or what. Then he wakes up in the dark and he kind of goes toward the sound. And then he finds that sound is coming from the kitchen. And then he goes and then he finds Bhima, who's also a little boy, sitting there. And Bhima is shown, is a kind of a sturdy among the brothers. And then he is just sitting and eating at night. And so this young Arjuna says, and Arjuna is a younger brother, so he asks Bhima, "Oh Dada, how are you able to do it in the dark, eating?" And then this Bhima says, "My brother, abhyas, just practice." And it's nicely put. I mean, so then that gives an idea to Arjuna. Yes, abhyas, I need to practice. And then immediately he goes out, and at night, then he starts practicing his archery. That's how he becomes one of the best archers in the world, because then even in the dark, he learns practicing, shooting at the target. So a very good idea is presented through that little kind of a funny incident. And we need to remember that also. So if we want to remember God at the moment of death, abhyas, we need to remember God now when we are healthy, when there is a full, good faculties of mind and body. If we can do that now and do abhyas, practice, then when the body and mind may not be so healthy, when we be very weak, when we may not be able to do a lot of things then that we can do now, but because of the training, abhyas, we will automatically able to do it. So that's what he says. With the mind that is taken to the way of constant practice, that's what abhyas is. And does not stray to anything else. That is what concentration means. It is then that we attain to God. Verse 9. So let's chant 9 and 10 together. Kavim Purana Manushasitaram Anoraniyan Samanusmaredyaha Sarvasya Dhataramachintya Rupam Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat Prayana Kale Manasachalena Bhaktya Yukto Yoga Balena Chaiva Bhruvor Madhye Pranamaveshya Samyak Satam Param Purushamupaiti Divyam. He who, endowed with devotion, meditates at the time of death with a steady mind, having by the power of yoga properly fixed the life breath in between the eyebrows, on the being who is wise, ancient, the ruler, smaller than the smallest, the sustainer of all, of inconceivable form, resplendent like the sun and beyond ignorance, he attains the shining supreme being. Endowed with devotion, we need that. How do we define devotion? Shankaracharya has a very good definition of devotion, and he says, Swaswarupa Anusandhanam Bhakti iti abhidhiyate. A one-pointed exploration, a one-pointed focus on one's true nature. That is devotion. Now that true nature seen subjectively is our own spirit, the Atma. But it's also possible to see that same truth, the same spirit objectively. It's just the way of how we see it. The spirit is one. If we see it subjectively, it's right here. If we see it objectively, we see it as God, Parameshwara. They are not two different entities. It's just whether we see it here or there, the truth itself is one. So devotion means the single-minded focus on that truth. So endowed with devotion, meditates at the time of death with a steady mind. That's what I meant by focus or concentration. So that steadiness will come through abhyasa, through practice. Having by the power of yoga properly fixed the life breath in between the eyebrows. Now sometimes people think it's actually just focus. So this is not to be taken literally. What it means is, what happens is if you just try to bring your it's not focusing your eyes on your on the. Sometimes in the Gita will say focus your eyes on the tip of the nose. Now here we hear about the life breath on eyebrows. It's like this. I don't want to get into technicalities because it's not necessary right now. But yogis have seen, detected different centers of consciousness in our hearts. And it sometimes this language can get very esoteric. You'll hear about chakras and so on, which sometimes can be a distraction. It's enough for us to know that there are levels of consciousness in our own heart. And it is said that when we say someone is very worldly, or someone who is just focused on the material world with no interest at all in higher realities, then such people's mind is said to be focused on the lower centers of consciousness. So spiritual life begins when the heart center is awakened. Now, the heart, of course, there is the physiological heart, and that's not really the heart that is referred to here. Heart, even the physiological heart is an important part of our body. But besides that heart, we also see heart as the seat of emotions or feelings. And that is different from the anatomical heart. Sometimes we know when we are overwhelmed with some emotion, we feel a heaviness. And then we have even language says, with a heavy heart. Sometimes people touch their heart when they say. So heart is also seen as a seat of emotions. So just as there is a physiological heart, there is the emotional heart. There is also something called the spiritual heart. So really we have three hearts. We know the location of the physiological heart. It can be seen, not by us. Actually, no one has seen their own heart, but we know it's there. Assuming that all of us are identical, assuming that we can believe the testimony of our surgeon when he cuts it open, every one of us has a heart. We can feel our emotional heart when we feel a strong surge of emotions. We feel something here, happening here. But not many of us have yet awakened. The phrase that you use is awakening the spiritual heart. And that is why when we begin our practice of meditation, meditation time, it's often said to shut out the senses so that the sensory data from the world will not come and distract us. So then we close our eyes, we try to sit in a calm place, and then we are expected to see God. But oftentimes we just shut everything out and we just see darkness. We see darkness because, well, God is there in our heart, the Spirit is there in our heart, but the Spirit is in the spiritual heart. So in order for us to see the Spirit, we first need to locate the spiritual heart. It's like if you want to go and meet somebody and you arrive at a big building. In order to meet that person, you first need to find out, well, which room are you in? Which floor and which room? And then I can go and find that person. In the same way, when we try to think of God, we have arrived at this building. I said, but where is the room in which to find? And so in the beginning, the struggle is not so much to see God. The first is to find the room where God dwells. And in order to find that room, first of all, we need abhyas. First of all, we need the capacity to take a U-turn, so to speak. The eyes, all our consciousness going out through the senses naturally goes out. So if I open my eyes, I don't have to, if my eyes are in good condition, I don't have to struggle to see. Automatically, I'm able to see everything. If my ears are not plugged in with this thing, I automatically hear all the sounds. So all this consciousness is going outside and grasping sounds, sights, everything. So when I shut it out, this capacity of consciousness to grasp things, instead of it going out, I have to make it go in. So it's like making it take a U-turn. And that's what inward looking means. We are naturally outward looking, but inward looking is to help all these things to go in, and then do it with steadiness, with a steady mind. Once we are able to awaken that heart, it's then that we really begin to enjoy meditation, because it's then not simply just struggling with it and kind of going through the motions, I won't go into it today, but on earlier occasions we have seen that meditation means seeing God, darshan. But if we can't see God, then the next best thing we can do is to think of God, which is what then we try to do through the practice of japa. What we try to do is we try to visualize the form of the Ishta. We try to hold on to the form of the Ishta in the mind. When we repeat the mantra, we try to hold on to the sound of the mantra. So we are keeping all worldly sounds outside and holding on only to the sacred sound of the mantra. We are keeping all worldly forms outside, just holding on to the sacred form of the divine. So we are thinking of the one form and one sound. And when that thinking becomes intense, at some point that thinking automatically stops and seeing begins. When it happens, how it happens, you cannot say. No one can say. It's like this. When you go to sleep, what you can do, what is in your hands to do, is to lie in bed, switch off the light, and try not to get very agitated. That's all that you can do. You cannot command sleep at a given moment. So you can make all preparations that, okay, let me now try to be peaceful, not worry about what happened yesterday, what happened tomorrow. Let me just relax. And then at some point, not at your choosing, suddenly sleep comes. It happens, but when it happens, how it happens, you cannot say. Exactly in the same way, all that you can do for real meditation to happen is to just make all preparations. And the preparation that you can do, ideally, is shut out all the senses. If you are an expert in sleep, then the moment you switch off the light, moment your head touches the cushion, you will fall asleep. If you're not such an expert in sleep, then even if you do all this thing, it'll take a while before you sleep. Exactly in the same way, if you're experts in meditation, then when all this is shut out, you will start seeing God. If that doesn't happen, then you shut all this out, then you start repeating your mantra. You hold on to the sound, you hold on to the form, keep on thinking intensely to the exclusion of everything else. And then meditation will occur on its own. So meditation is something that happens. Meditation is not something that you do. What you can do is all this preparation. What you can do is try to keep the world out. What you can do is try to hold on to the form and the sound related to the sacred, to the exclusion of everything else. That's what you can do. And then just be patient. And then meditation happens. And that will happen when this heart is awakened. And once that heart is awakened, then you see a different path. It's almost like the Lord of the Rings or some of these kind of tales that have come and that we might have read in our childhood. It's like there is some treasure somewhere or something, and there is a hidden tunnel, and no one knows where that tunnel is, and people are searching for it everywhere. And then once you find that tunnel, and then suddenly you find, oh, there is this huge way, and no one knows this way exists, and then you start going along that way. I'm dramatizing it, but this is the discovery that we make when the heart center is awakened is no less dramatic. Then suddenly you find, well, this area might seem to be pretty small, but the space in that spiritual heart is infinite. Once we locate it, we can see that the entire universes can be filled here. So that space is different from this space. Then you see a different road altogether. And then through that road, when the spirit starts going, that's when it enters. And then we go to the higher centers of consciousness, here, and so on. So that is what it meant here when it says, fix the life breath in between the eyebrows. So it's not looking at your eyebrows, it's not just focusing there. It's really awakening the heart, and then your prana starts going out. That's the idea. And as I said, right now, don't get into too many technicalities. Just remember the importance of withdrawing the mind away from the material world, even if it is for a short time, the importance of concentration, and importance of recognizing that there are deeper truths, deeper realities, deeper spaces within us which need to be explored. And then we have to be strong, we have to be brave. All these great explorers, they were not easygoing, laid-back people. Then nothing would have been discovered. They were people who were willing to take risks. They were people who were willing to look for adventure. And spiritual life is an adventure. One of the famous quotes that Vivekananda often, that is attributed to Vivekananda, is that he often quoted this portion from the Upanishads. Nayam atma balahinena lapyaha. This Atman cannot be attained by the weak, by the cowardly. So, if we have to be brave, strong, and courageous in the world in order to succeed, we need to be even more brave, more courageous, more strong to pursue spiritual life. So spiritual life, as sometimes critics make it out to be, as if it's a form of escapism, that those who cannot deal with challenges of the external world then try to think of God, they just miss the point altogether. You need a lot more courage, a lot more strength to think of God. So it's good to remember, the challenges in the internal world are not any less. If anything, they are actually more than the external world. So this is not a path meant for the namby-pamby, as they say. On the being, and what is the kind of being? So you have all these descriptions of how God is: wise, ancient, the ruler in the sense, that's why Ishvara, the word Ishvara, comes from the Sanskrit root ish, which means to rule. So Ishvara means literally that everything, all the natural phenomena that occur in the world, everything happens by the will of God. So there is this portion in the Upanishads which says, Bhisha asmad vatav pavate, Bhisho deti suryaha, and so on. That even the sun rises out of fear of the Infinite One. The wind, the sun, the rain, everything that happens is happened by the will of God. And that's why God is the ruler. Smaller than the smallest. It is said in the Vedas, Tat srishtva tadeva anupravishata. Having created, having projected this world, God entered into every tiny bit of it. So the tiniest bit that we can even conceive of, let alone see or measure, God is present in that thing. So of course, God will be smaller than the smallest. The sustainer of all, of inconceivable form. We can have only limited ideas of the form, but God is inconceivable, being beyond our mind and speech. Resplendent like the sun. The sun doesn't depend on anything outside of itself for its light. The sun is self-illumined as far as the physical light is concerned. Similarly, God does not depend on anything outside. God is self, swayambhu, that's the word used, beyond ignorance. And to such a supreme being, one attains through abhyasa, if we are able to focus our mind to the exclusion of everything else. Okay, I'll pause here. Do you have any questions or thoughts about what we have said so far?
So, Swamiji, I'm just wondering, why did Krishna has to relate it to death? Why not? I mean, that sounds like in order to attain God, you have to die.
No, he's not saying you have to die.
I mean, that's what it sounds like. In order to, if you remember me at the time of die, then you will attain me.
Yeah. But that doesn't mean that you will not attain me before you die.
Yeah, so that's why I'm wondering why did he had to bring the death in this context?
No, why not? Because death is one thing that we are all concerned about. It's one reality of life. So here he's pointing out the importance of knowledge coming through focusing our attention, or whatever we focus our attention to, knowledge comes through that. So he says, even at the what happens after death will depend on the knowledge, the last moment that we have. So in that context, he says, if at that last moment, if I'm thinking of God, that's where my onward journey will take me. But that doesn't automatically imply that I can realize God only after death. That's the idea.
So, Swamiji, when you read the verses and they say that with constant practice and does not stray to anything else, I mean, it implies that you are in samadhi at all times. So, for instance, in verse 8, and they talk about the way is of constant practice, and then you do not stray to anything else. That seems to be samadhi.
Yes, that is samadhi. So when it happens, then of course you are in samadhi. But if it has not happened yet, it means that is the kind of practice we will do. We may not succeed immediately. Well, if we succeed immediately, you are already in samadhi, you already attained God. Then again, that comes to answering to your question. We don't have to wait until death for that to happen. But the idea is that suppose I keep on practicing imperfectly. I don't succeed, but I keep on practicing it. And because of that practice, even at the time of death, I'm able to think of God, then that will help me in my onward journey. So that doesn't preclude the possibility of me succeeding even before dying.
I just want to mention about your discussing about multitasking, you tell. I feel somehow it is very difficult not to multitask, especially the time we get up in the morning. We always think we have very little time and we have to do a lot of things. So if we try to do one thing at a time, I think only the meditation or prayer we try to do one at a time, but most of the other things we are always trying to do many things. So brushing, think about what's happening. So it's very difficult to not to multitask all the time.
Correct. I agree with you. But what I said was, if you want to use the words more accurately, then we are not really, multitasking is really not possible. That is, at any given moment, you cannot do more than one thing. So even when you are brushing your teeth and thinking of something else, what you're doing is one moment your thought is at the brush, the other moment there. Then you bring it here, then you bring it there. So your mind is kind of still going back and forth. One of the reasons we get exhausted, even if we have not done too much physical work, the mind gets exhausted because mind is continuously boom, 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 boom. It's like going all over. So if you are able to find a way to hold it on to one idea, you will see that you will do that work in a better way. And this is little counterintuitive, you will actually save time. We think that while I'm brushing my teeth, if I'm planning, then I don't have to, I'm saving the time now, because if I first brush my teeth and then plan, then it's going to take more time. Actually, no. I said it's counterintuitive. It doesn't seem that way. And it's not very, because the mind has gotten used to doing that way, it won't be easy to separate the two. But make even an imperfect attempt. You're brushing your teeth, just brush your teeth. Concentrate fully. Think about the brush as you brush. See its bristles touching the edge of your gum, the amount of pressure that you're applying, and so on. And if you're focusing on that, then it will be very difficult to plan anything if you're focusing on all these every tiny details. But if you really do that, first of all, you will do a better job at brushing your teeth. You will enjoy brushing more, and you will be able to do it quickly. And then you just sit and say, okay, let me plan about the things that I'm supposed to do. You will find while you're planning, if you're doing only planning, not doing anything else, you will be able to make a better plan, you will be able to do it quickly, and you will be very satisfied with it. Now, it's easy to say, separate it out. And I know the practical difficulties because our mind has gotten used to doing something else while thinking something else. Now, that is a problem. That's a problem because if while I'm brushing, I'm planning for the day and my mind is not at the brushing, then when I'm thinking about, when I'm brushing my teeth, I'm thinking, okay, so now I have to do this, but now I must first go and drink a cup of coffee. So I'm brushing but thinking of coffee. Now, then I go start fixing a cup of coffee. But when I'm fixing a cup of coffee, I'm actually drinking coffee, but at the time thinking, now I need to go and do this. Then I go and do that. While I'm doing that, I'm thinking of something else. Now, what has happened is, I have then gotten used to the habit of doing one thing and thinking of something else. Okay? Once that becomes the way my mind functions, with the same mind then I say, oh, now I'm going to meditate. No, if I have gotten used to doing one thing and thinking something else, then I cannot complain. Oh, when I'm meditating, this lot of distraction, lot of other thoughts come. Of course they will come, because that is what the mind has gotten trained to do. But while I'm brushing, my mind is fully at brushing. When I'm drinking a cup of coffee, you just try it out. When you're drinking a cup of coffee, just be with that coffee without anything else. You will enjoy that cup of coffee more. You will really relish it and value it, and you will really love it. And you will say, wow, I've been drinking coffee so many years, I never knew it was so good. If you train yourself doing it, then when you sit for meditation, that time you'll be just meditating then. But that's what the training of the mind means. That's what abhyasa means.
Actually, just a quick comment. I was once at a Vipassana meditation, like they call it a boot camp for a day. And there basically what they do is during the lunchtime when they serve food, they ask you not to talk to anybody and just slowly like chew your food and just focus on the taste of the food. And then later they switch between sitting and meditating and walking and meditating actually. And they're saying when you're walking, just focus on taking each step. And so that was their sort of,
Sure.
I guess it ties to what you just mentioned.
Sure, yeah. See, vipassana is a Pali word. Actually, it comes from the Sanskrit, vipashyan. Pashya is to see. The V prefix means to see deeply, to look clearly. So vipashyan, and then Pali it becomes vipassana. And it makes a big difference. It does make a big difference. So if we can do one thing at a time, it's really a very helpful practice. That's why, and then even students, when we are studying, if my mind is trained, while I'm reading, I should be reading. You will see that I'll read quickly, I will understand better. When you're writing, you must be writing. When you're watching a movie, if you're watching a movie, watch the movie. You will enjoy it more. Because while watching the movie, if I'm thinking about what I'm going to do afterwards, you're wasting your time. You're not really watching the movie. And sometimes people go pay money and watch, but they are planning of what they should do afterwards. They're wasting their money. So you get full value of your money. You're watching the movie, just watch the movie. So that's the way we need to train our mind. That will be really helpful. Yeah. See, sometimes even our interpersonal relationships will improve. You see, when you go home tired and your wife or husband or children or a friend, whoever comes and say, hey, how are you? And speaking, but you have been so worried about the kind of things that happened that day that you are not fully present even when you are speaking with a friend or a family member. And so we carry the what's happened earlier in the day with us, and then sometimes misunderstandings occur. Somebody said, I'm speaking with you and you're not even listening. You're not listening, but you're listening to something else in your mind that time. And so if whenever we are dealing with any person, if you can be fully present there, you will understand, you will the exchange of thoughts that occurs will be more productive, will be good if both the present two persons who are talking are both are present there. And if one of them is thinking of something else, then that conversation will not go far. So it really is very helpful.
Swamiji, how do you, excuse me, how do you manage the difference between the external tempo? So you may be in an environment or a situation where externally the tempo may be very fast, but then you want to still keep your own internal tempo more controlled and rhythmic. How do you manage those without feeling slow or unable to keep up? Because
Not clear.
So, part of the point you were making before is that our senses are outward bound. But I think the environment in which we live captures our senses, so therefore we almost feel saturated that we're unable to look or control how we direct our senses. So an example would be if you're in an environment where, imagine you're a trader on on the New York Stock Exchange. So it's constantly incredibly active, but at the same time, how in that situation would you maintain a slower, because I'm sensing slowness is of value.
Yeah, so I think what does help is we have to be creative in our spiritual life. By creative, I mean, first of all, it's not possible because of not only because we have a lot of responsibilities and things that we need to do, that we cannot just sit and just meditate 24 hours a day. Because even if we had all the time, we still won't be able to meditate for 24 hours a day. So we don't have that capacity to just shut the world out. So the world is going to be a major component in our life, even though we might devote some time for meditation sometime during the day, or twice or thrice during a day. So what do we do the rest of the time when we are not thinking of directly about God? When the world is there with all its variety and forms and sounds and the craziness around. So we can be creative at such time by finding ways of remembering God even in the midst of all this craziness. Which is why that verse which I actually chant during a worship, which is part of mental worship, there is one verse. It's actually one verse from a longer hymn that Shankaracharya wrote. It's called Shiva Aparadha Kshamapana Stotra, seeking forgiveness from Shiva. And it's a beautiful verse, and it goes like this. Atma tvam girijamati sahachara prana shariram griham puja te vishayopabhoga rachana nidra samadhi sthitihi sancharav padayo pradakshina vidhi stotrani sarva giro yadyat karma karomi tattadakhilam shambho tavaradhanam. Beautiful. It says, Atma tvam, O Lord, you are the Atman. Girija matihi, the Divine Mother is Buddhi. So my intellect is the Divine Mother. And God is the Atman. Sahachara pranaha. So all these senses that I have are the companions of God. So we find the different deities in the tradition, So Shiva. So Shiva has his own Nandi and the whole mythology associated with Shiva or Vishnu. So whichever form of God that we are associated with, we can see that if that form of the divine, it doesn't, Atman is put in a very kind of a neutral way, but we can as well substitute it with any of the other deities that we are able to connect to. It could be Shiva, Vishnu, Ramakrishna, Buddha, anybody. So Divine Mother, the power of God is the intellect, and the companions of God are all my senses. Sahachara prana, shariram graham. So this is the abode of God. That's why we say when God dwells in the heart, the body is the abode of God. It's a temple. So the body itself can be seen as the temple. Shariram graham, pujate vishayopabhoga rachana. So just like in a ritualistic worship, we use flowers, sandal paste, incense. So these are the ingredients used for ritualistic worship. So all the sights, smells, and touch, all the sensory input that we get, these are the ingredients for the worship of this cosmic deity. So look upon all sensory data as ingredients for puja. Nidra samadhi sthitihi. Look upon your sleep as a state of samadhi. Because what does happen in samadhi? The world completely disappears, and that's exactly what happens in sleep. So instead of looking upon sleep as sleep, you can look upon it as samadhi. Nidra samadhi sthitihi. Sancharav padayo pradakshina vidhi. Now, during the day we walk. We have to walk here and there. We can either look upon walking as, well, I just have to walk there. Or we can say, well, if God is present in this cosmic form, then even walking is like pradakshina. So when you go to a temple, there is a system about going around the deity. So every walk can be seen as I'm really going around this cosmic form of the divine. Sancharav padayo pradakshina vidhi stotrani sarva giro. Now when you pray, we are using words, we are making sound, but rest of the day we are doing a lot of talking also. That time also we are using words, there is sound. So can I look upon all of my speech as a prayer? Everything that I say as a prayer of the divine. If you are able to remember that, you will never be able to be nasty with anybody. You will never be able to abuse anybody. In fact, one of our very senior Swamis, who later became a president of the order, named Swami Ranganathananda, he used to say that when he was a little boy, and that time he said once when he went to school and he learned some abusive word from some friends, and he didn't even know the meaning. So when he came home, he just kind of blurted out those words, and his mother was shocked. She's saying, where did you learn all those words? And he said, well, that's what my friend was saying. And then he said his mother told him, you see, even mothers, as mother, as father, as teacher, we can be so creative. So rather than scolding him, the mother said, look, the tongue is where the Saraswati, the goddess of knowledge, dwells. So when you use words like this, you are actually insulting the goddess of knowledge. And he said that went so deep into his heart that never again in his life he was able to say anything hurtful or anything which is abusive. So that's what being creative means. So if I see that when I speak, those words are really in some way a prayer to the divine. Stotrani sarva giro, yadyat karma karomi, whatever work that I do, tattadeva akhilam, all of that, shambho tava aradhanam, all my work, O God, is worship, which is really nothing but karma yoga. So karma yoga, doing all of our work as an offering to the divine, using all of our words as offering to the divine, using all of our thoughts. So the more we are able to connect these faculties within us, the more we are able to collect the objects outside of us to our spiritual ideal, then this inner temple and outer temple gap will become less. Does that make sense? Okay. So we will stop here today, and when we meet next time, We will resume on verse number 11. Om Jananim Saratam Devim Ramakrishnam Jagadgurum Padapadme Tayo Shritva Pranamami Muhur Muhuhu. We bow down to Ramakrishna and Holy Mother. Our topics on Sunday will be silence as yoga. I probably will have to speak while on this subject, but I will talk about silence, and all of you will listen in silence. And on next Wednesday, we will continue with the study of the Gita. On Tuesday and Saturday, we'll have the Arati and meditation as usual. So you're welcome for these programs. We'll conclude with a prayer now on page 3. May the Divine Being, who is the Father in heaven of the Christians, Holy One of the Jewish faith, Allah of the Muslims, Buddha of the Buddhists, Tao of the Taoists, Ahura Mazda of the Zoroastrians, the Great Spirit of the Native Americans, and Brahman of the Hindus, lead us from the unreal to the real, from darkness to light, from death to immortality. May we be granted strength, freedom, and clear understanding. May we learn to see God in our own hearts and in everyone around us. May God bless us all and fill our hearts with gratitude, grace, and love. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.